Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. Now that the Democrats are moving into the White House, will the rights of American workers actually improve? Let's get to the bottom line. Compared to much of the developed world, the United States is the Wild West of labor markets. Protections for American laborers have eroded. Unions are shunned by the biggest and richest corporations in the world, and workers are all too often the most expendable parts of the corporate equation. If capitalism was working right, why is it that virtually nowhere in America can a full-time minimum wage worker find a two-bedroom apartment? Technology continues to move forward, disrupting jobs, particularly for large segments of the lesser skilled workforce. Some really win big, but this also creates more and more unstable, low-paying jobs with few, if any, benefits. Today, we're honored to speak to a legendary leader who literally spent her life trying to give voice and power to the voiceless and powerless. She was born 10 years after women secured the right to vote in America. Dolores Huerta made history along with Cesar Chavez, where both began organizing poor and abused farm workers in California in the 1960s. And she's not stopped her quest for equality in America ever since. In 2012, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her advocacy of civil rights, workers' rights, and women's rights by President Barack Obama. She's also originator of the uplifting catchphrase, "Si se puede," yes, we can. Dolores Huerta, what an honor to have you on with us today. I want to read something to you that Jared Kushner said and ask you to respond to that. He said, President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful. When you think about American labor and American workers, do red flags go off?
Yes, definitely, because we've seen that workers' wages have gone down continuously. The cost of living has gone up, and the workers, it's impossible for them to catch up. And even when they talk about a $15 an hour minimum wage, we know that minimum wage to keep up with the cost of living should be more like $30 an hour, and maybe now even more than that, maybe $35 or $40 an hour. Because workers cannot make it on a minimum wage today, and workers have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to pay the rent, be able to put food on the table, let alone try to save money for their children's college education. So workers are in an impossible dilemma right now because they are not getting this type of support that they should be getting.
In the 1960s, when you and Cesar Chavez, got out into organizing farm workers in California and started such a major movement, I guess my question today is, how do you feel that today differs from that time, if at all? Is the toxicity different? Is the attitude towards workers different? Do you feel like there's been a lot of gains made that we can build on, but there's still a lot to do?
No, I think that workers' rights have deteriorated substantially, and we have seen this happen with fast food workers who are not given a 40-hour work week. They're all temporary workers. They come in 1 or 2 days a week. We see this with the fast food industry. We see this with Walmart, one of the nation's major employers, where workers are not given a 40-hour work week, so then they don't qualify for a health plan. We see what happened recently in California with Proposition 22, when Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and all of these gig workers were literally voted through a proposition. And the reason that people voted the way that they did is because you had millions and millions of dollars that was spent in advertising and in mailers to get people to vote against workers having basic labor rights. And I'm talking about Social Security, unemployment insurance, just the basic things that workers need to protect them. And yet these giant companies like Amazon, they spend millions of dollars, and Uber, the Uber people, and the Lyft owners, to prevent workers from having basic labor right coverage. It is just incredible. And then recently, President Trump has been pushing for the Department of Labor to diminish the minimum wage for workers that are brought in from other countries. And what this does is not only diminishes their wages, but it also lessens the wages of the domestic workers, because what happens to those contract workers that are brought in from other countries, in agriculture, the H2A workers, then it also lowers the wages of the local farm workers.
Do you think you're being heard now in the new team that's coming in with President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris? Do you feel that they get it? How secure, are workers' rights with the new team coming in?
Well, I think workers' rights are still in peril. I know that President-elect Biden and both Kamala Harris, that they both support workers and they support labor unions. But at the same time, we have seen that the power of the corporate world has just it's grown so immense that it will be very difficult for them to be able to change anything, and especially if they do not win control of the Senate in the Georgia election. So January the 5th in that Georgia election is going to determine, how much the president can actually change, and he can change the people that will run the National Labor Relations law and appoint people in that respect. But in some of the bigger major issues, I think it will be very, very hard for him. We know that he wants to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And in states like the South, places where right now the minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour, that will help. And many places, even on the East Coast, in places like California, in the West Coast, it'll be the $15 an hour really doesn't do that much.
Part of the Dolores Huerta brand is going door to door, organizing with people personally, hearing their worries and speaking to them one-on-one, or to a family, and understanding where that's at. We're in the era of COVID right now. Lots of people have suffered and have been impacted. So much has gone on to, the digital online space. How has this time of COVID changed your work and changed the organizing and advocating for labor rights?
Well, it has really affected us very adversely because we do people-to-people organizing. We have meetings in people's homes. We call them house meetings with just 5 to 6 people, maybe 8 at the most, and mostly with families. And what we do then is we talk about the issues. We talk about how the issues can be solved, and then we invite them to come and commit themselves to work on these issues to be able to improve them. And of course, we cannot do this. And many of the people that or most of the people that we organize are low-income people. Many of them are from the immigrant community. They don't have computers. In many places, they don't even have broadband. So, and of course, it's affected the children. Now that the schools have been closed, our children have been set back so much because they were not able to have the hotspots or at first the computers that they needed to do their work. So it's been very, very difficult. And in the last elections, the canvassing, going door to door, reminding people that they had to vote, registering people to vote, we did that all on a person-to-person basis. And of course, we couldn't do that with the pandemic. We were able to do some work on the census, and we did have canvassers, but it was very, very difficult for them to do their work. And then there is so much fear in the community because of President Trump's constant attack against Latinos, especially Mexicans. People were just terrified, often just even to open the door. So all of this coming together made it very, very hard for us to do our work. So we had to revert back to doing as much as we could online. And we were able to reach a lot of people, but then there's a lot of people that we were not able to reach. To be able to get information out to folks about the resources that were available to them with the pandemic, because we ran a lot of food banks, we had to resort to telephone calls and texting, doing a lot of leafleting, even sending people letters in the mail to let them know that these resources are available to you. And so we could get out the information, but in order to recruit more people and to motivate more folks to come and join the movement, the grassroots movement, it was more difficult.
I was enjoying the PBS documentary about you, Dolores, and fascinating, but I was also struck by the fact that she didn't understand what a big role bigotry played in anti-workers movements campaigns. And that the bigotry of that time, the bigotry of today, I sort of feel it, see it. It's a big deal. We've seen it in the George Floyd murder protests and the racial tensions in America. But we've got 60 million Latinos in America right now. And you're not only just about Latino workers, you're about all workers. But my question is, how have you been able to deal with the bigotry out there? And some of it's been directed towards you.
Well, we know that this is part, unfortunately, of the American landscape, that we still have a lot of racism. And we just have to make people understand that the reason we do have racism is to somehow be able to justify that you treat people of color differently, and how somehow they are supposed to be subhuman or not human enough to be treated the way that white people get treated. So this is something that we have to address in our society at all levels, because we have all of our agencies of government and our institutions, health institutions, our educational institutions, the criminal justice institutions. These are all, you might say, tainted by racism. And so we have to start dismantling the racism, as Reverend Lawson says, dismantle the systems of oppression that exist in our society. And workers have to understand that it's not about them. It's about this racist system that we have in the United States of America, and so that they cannot let that inhibit them or stop them from trying to go forward and trying to improve their own conditions. So, but we know that young people, especially, are demanding change right now. They've been marching on the streets. They're demanding racial, gender, and economic justice. And hopefully the pressure will continue, especially on our politicians, to make the laws that we need to have made to change this racist system that we have. In the meantime, workers just have to keep trudging along and organizing and fighting for themselves as much as they can, and keeping the pressure up on people in power to change all of this.
How do you see the state of unions in America? When I look at Europe and see, 65% of the workforce is unionized, I look at the United States and you sort of see 10% and declining. I'm interested in what you think is going to be needed to either give unions an uptick or to give labor in some other form the kind of power it needs to get to the equilibrium it needs to have.
I think that's the big question. You just asked the $64 question. And we know that the corporate power in the United States now is so extreme and so powerful that it is very difficult for labor unions to be able to fight against this power. I can give you a little example here in California with the farmworkers union, a company that I actually ran the election, began the negotiations over 20 years ago. And the United Farm Workers has not been able to get a contract with that company. And they prefer to spend millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars, to prevent workers from having a union contract and better wages, better health conditions, or pension plans. They prefer that. And all of those millions that they could have given to the workers directly in some of these benefits, they use that money to fight the unions. And so the unions are really hamstrung right now. One of the laws that would make it very simple for unions to get recognition would be to have card check elections. Well, with a card check, your signature would be good enough to be able to get recognition. And if your signature is good enough to buy a house, buy a car, get married, get a divorce, then it should be good enough to be able to represent your union. And not only that, but like the Farm Workers Union, once the labor union gets representation, the employers refuse to bargain. And they use every legal option that they have to prevent workers from getting a contract. And when we see again what's happening with like Walmart and Uber and Lyft and these companies here, they don't want the workers to have representation. They don't care about their workers. All they care about is making money. And this is something that is very insidious and cynical and wrong in the United States of America. And the thing is that we do not have labor unions, if we do not have a strong middle class, which is what labor unions do. Labor unions create the middle class. And if we do not have a middle class, then we don't have a democracy. And when we see the erosion of our democracy in the United States of America, that is one of the areas that we can point to and say, this is happening because the working people do not have the power that they need to have in our society. So it's a big dilemma, and it's also a big threat. And we have to figure out how we're going to change this, and we have to pass laws that are going to help our labor unions, because at this point in time, they need a lot of support.
We have a lot of unions in America. Richard Trumka at the AFL-CIO, Randy Weingarten at the American Federation of Teachers, Mary Kay Henry at SEIU. Lots of union leaders out there. And I guess my question to you, perhaps an unfair one, is is there something they're getting wrong? Is there a blind spot that unions have about how to become more vital, more successful in this equation? If you keep losing, the question is, how do you begin reorganizing to win more? Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, when you just mentioned Mary Kay Henry with Service Employees International Union and Ms. Weingarten for the Teachers Union, remember, these are public institutions. The service employee represents public workers, pretty much, people that work for the government, be it state or federal. But the thing is that the other unions, they are much stronger, you might say, than the unions that represent just regular working people, like in construction, the auto workers, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the employers have done everything that they can to weaken labor unions, and it's going to take a lot of laws to be able to support them. For instance, a lot of the auto industry, they moved to the South, where you have right-to-work laws. Well, getting rid of those right-to-work laws in the South, like places like Texas, would actually make it easier for workers to be able to join labor unions in the first place. But the other thing is that the employers, they lie and they cheat. Okay, and when I was referring to what happened here with Proposition 22 in California, that took away any possible rights that workers who drive these Ubers and Lyfts and these other gig drivers, DoorDash, when they did this by lying, literally to the public, spending. So when you're dealing with people who lie, cheat, and deprive their workers of benefits that they should have, because of all of the money that they have to deceive the public, this makes it a very unfair game. And you don't have a referee in the middle. So the only referee at this point would be our governments. But so many of the people in government, they are also, and I'm going to say this very crudely, bought off by these large employers. So we've got to bring honesty and trust and justice and caring for workers back into our life and into our government. And then I think we've got to just start electing progressives that are going to fight for workers and that are not going to give in to the pressure of these major corporations that are doing all of this damage to workers and to our society.
It's fascinating you talk about the right-to-work laws, because Pete Buttigieg, who is now has been nominated to be Secretary of Transportation, has said specifically he wants to work to roll those back. So we'll have to see what it is. You'll have to tell me whether you're going to visit Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and, of course, the president and try and work on those right-to-work laws.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned that too, because we also have what's happening in the global world, right, where so many jobs, as we know, have been shipped overseas, and I haven't seen anything now in terms of the last NAFTA, the second NAFTA that was passed, how that's going to be helping American workers, and even those countries like Mexico. The Mexican farmers have been devastated by NAFTA. And when they talk about illegal immigration, I think it was something like 8 million of the workers that came from Mexico coming to the United States these are farmers. These are small family farmers who in no way could compete with the agribusiness that we have in the United States. Mexico is where the corn was conceived, right there in Mexico. And today in Mexico, they import more corn from the United States than what they grow in Mexico. And so we can see this imbalance. And I know that many of the organizations like Public Citizen that work on global issues, they talk about these things. But so you have workers that are suffering not only in the countries where we are exporting our goods, but we have the same thing happening to our workers here in the United States. So we can almost safely say that workers all over the world are suffering because of these global trade agreements that are they are very, very helpful to the corporations, but they are very harmful to workers.
I have to ask, because you have the benefit of long experience out there fighting battles and whatnot, and I just was amused and kind of excited and jealous that you were that your own Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony was shared with people like Toni Morrison and Bob Dylan, and all of you. When you look at you look at the folks that were up there, lived through times of great division in the country, great divide and tension. And in part, that's what the president was awarding and highlighting when they did this. But I also know that you were in the room when Robert Kennedy was assassinated. When you look at this time, when people feel like it's been a horrific time in America, I'd just love to know how you see it. Is this just like any other decade where we have problems, or is this time worse than others?
Well, I was born during the Depression, and I grew up as a child during the Depression. And I remember so many things that happened during the Depression. I got my pre-dancing lessons, tap dancing, and my pre-violin lessons. And I know all of the great artwork that was created during the Depression. And that's when we got Social Security and when workers got the right to organize. Then I lived through World War II, where my father and my brothers all had to go to the service. And when we came out of that, we had the large numbers of women that went into the workplace that had never happened before. We had soldiers that were coming back from the war that got to go to college free, So, there were things that happened after each one of these crises in our country. And I do feel that now that we are highlighting some of these issues that we have lived with for centuries, the racism, the sexism, and now we have the new issue of climate change, which is a brand new one for us here, that I do feel very, very hopeful. And the reason I feel hopeful is because all the young people, all the people that took to the streets, and not just young people, we had, and people of all ethnic groups, we had white people and brown people and black people and Asian people that were all marching for economic, racial, and gender justice. And I do see that this is going to happen, that it's going to change. We just saw in this last election that we just had more people voting than any time in the history of the United States of America. And that's with the pandemic, where people like ourselves couldn't go out there and register people to vote and canvass and get the people out to vote. All of this happened. And we see that now we have all of these tools like the internet and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, that all of especially the young people have at their disposal. And we've got young leaders like Greta, who's fighting for climate change, Emma Gonzalez from Florida, who's fighting to get rid of gun violence. And it's a remarkable moment in history right now, and I feel very hopeful because the spotlight is on all of the things that we need to change. The injustices against people of color, against women, against working people, against our students, our educational system that needs to be completely revamped and remade. So I feel very, very hopeful because I think that the energy is out there. The young people, especially that are committed to make these changes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I think those people, especially the politicians that stand in the way, they're not going to be there for very long. They might be there for one or two election cycles, but eventually they're going to have to get into the movement, do the right thing, or get out.
Well, Dolores Huerta, iconic labor and civil rights advocate, I just want to thank you. That I want to tell my viewers that you're not just about hope, you're about doing and action. It's a real honor to have you on our show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
So what's the bottom line? I guess it's human nature for the well-off to look down on hardworking people at the bottom of the economic ladder. But things were bad before the pandemic for millions of Americans, and now people have to make their way with less and less. Dolores Huerta's life work has been the struggle to turn this around. to secure respect and pay and rights for workers. And she's so inspiring, and she's absolutely right. Democrats and Republicans haven't been turning things around for workers, but as Dolores says, there's always hope. Well, we will be watching, and that's the bottom line.